my name is Justin, and lesson is part of Unit 2, Learning About the Language, and we have previously spoken about the present tenses. Now we're going to have a quick look at the past tenses. So if we remember how to speak about the present tenses, we had our present simple or simple present, and then we had our present progressive or present continuous. And we have the same for the past tenses. So remembering that present simple, for example, something that happens every day. Present progressive, something we're doing right now. And the same exists to an extent in the past. So something that was continuous and also something that was repeated. So the six main, we have, for example, the past, which is simple and progressive. Then we have our present perfect tenses. Now these are the ones that many students find really difficult, especially because the name is present perfect, but it is in fact a past tense. And why it's referred to as present perfect is because it talks about a relationship between the past and the present. So again, you have simple versus progressive in the past, simple. Then you have present perfect simple, present perfect progressive, and past perfect simple and past perfect progressive. So these would be the 6 different types of the past tense. So we're going to try to have a look at each one, looking at examples and looking at the different structure. So you can have a look as well over the different structures, and we can discuss them in our online discussions and our online classes. So first we'll have a look at the slide with the examples. The first one we have past simple. So for example, I looked, she waited, it rained. Then the past progressive. So it usually talks about a foreground action which works its way up to the past. For example, I was looking, she was waiting, it was raining. So you could have I was looking through the window when it rained. Then your present perfect, this one uses our past participle, or as many students like to call it, verb 3 from the columns. For example, I have, there's your present using auxiliary have, looked. Okay? And then the present perfect progressive is the same, I have been looking. So you look at your main verb, the verb, let's say, to be, it goes to the past participle, which is verb 3, becomes been. It is preceded by your auxiliary verb have, and then followed by your verb with ing. This will become a little bit clearer as we look at the different examples. Then, some examples of the past perfect simple. You have again your auxiliary verb have, put it into the past, which is had, and then your past participle, which gives you the perfect side of the sentence. For example, I had looked, she had waited, it had rained. And then you had the past perfect progressive. So again, looking for perfect, we must have in all the perfects a past participle. So here again, progressive always has be and always has ing. So we have the verb to be, put it into past participle, been, then your main verb, look, plus present participle ing, and then preceded by your perfect verb have in auxiliary, put into the past to make had been looking. So on your slide you see this little task, this activity for you. You need to try to form the sentences in the past simple or the sentences in the past progressive, present perfect simple, present perfect progressive, past perfect simple, past perfect progressive. Now the ones that are completed for you will help you with each tense. Remembering that past simple is a completed finish action, so it would be just pronoun plus the verb with the ed ending. Then your past progressive is, progressive always has the verb to be, always has the ing. So past progressive, your verb to be must be in the past. Your present perfect simple, all of the perfects must have the auxiliary verb have and the ed participle, so verb 3. Then we look at present perfect progressive. again, still must have ing, still must have because it's perfect, and still must have the ed ending. And the same for past perfect progressive. So try to take a couple of minutes to complete the gaps in that activity. So we're going to quickly have a look at the different structures. You can look at them in more depth in the PowerPoint, and we can discuss them in our online discussions. So the past simple is formed with regular verbs, simply add ed. Then the irregular verbs, they change, as we said. For example, I walk is regular, becomes I walked. Irregular verb, I swim, becomes I swam. And the students need to learn as many of them off as possible. Most TEFL books will have a list in a column of each verb. So the idea is that the students try to learn as many as possible in, let's say, so many days. So you can have a look at your own time at the different functions, but we will look mainly at the first function of the past simple. For example, it refers to an action or event with a definite time reference. So the first example is, did you watch that program last night? You see, last night is the definite time reference. Did is your past tense of the auxiliary verb do, and then your main verb watch stays in infinitive. So did you watch that program? The second example is a little easier. You have, he left at the beginning of last year. So at the beginning of last year, an exact time reference, and then left, your past tense of the regular verb leave. So the next function shows you that even though the definite time is not referred to, it can still be in the past simple. For example, George Orwell wrote 1984. So you're not told exactly what time he wrote 1984. Past simple can also be used for events and states, for single events, for habits, and for states in the past. For example, he fell off the wall and got 5 stitches. They did a lot of drama at school. So again, past simple of the verb to do. She looked very, very tired. So that was the past simple. The past progressive usually is an action before the past simple. For example, it uses the past form of the verb to be, so was, were, plus your main verb, plus ing. So every time you see, a good rule to explain to your students is that every time you see the word progressive or continuous, it must have ing. Then you look at your main verb, and your auxiliary verb, and if it's in the present, then it's present continuous. If it's in the past, then it's past continuous. And it's used to refer generally to events in progress around the particular time. And it may highlight again, like present continuous, a temporary nature of events. For example, the house I was living in last year was very damp. So again, it's temporary, and the second part of the sentence is in past simple, was very damp. So the next slide compares the past simple and the past progressive. So just some differences. Usually the past progressive is used first before the past simple. For example, many years later, past simple, we walked past. But then you have past progressive. Many years later, we were walking past the house. And the past continuous is used for a background event moving up to the foreground. For example, one time 2 builders were working on our house, and a ghost foreground, past simple, and further foreground, and they refused to come back. So past progressive kind of sets the scene, and then past simple brings it more towards the present. So So the past progressive can be used to refer to definite past time, usually to emphasize the extended nature of the event. Again, like the present continuous, there are certain verbs that do not exist in the past progressive. For example, again, the mental state verbs: believe, know, mean, think. The sense verbs: taste, smell. The feeling verbs: hate, love, like. And that was the past simple and the past progressive. Now the next one, which is fairly difficult for many students, is the present perfect tenses. Because the name present, a student may think it's a present tense, but in fact it is a past tense with a reference to the present. And it's usually used for life experiences or something that happened very, very close to the present. And it's formed with your auxiliary verb have plus your main verb in the ed past participle form. And the diagram on your PowerPoint shows when it is speaking about events relating from the past into the present. And this is one of the main structures, main functions of the present perfect tense. Have a look at the examples. The interrogative example: has anything much happened since we last met? So happened, past perfect. Since we last met, has your auxiliary verb in the present. So if it was past perfect, your auxiliary verb have would change to the past and be had. Another example: John and Deirdre have split up in the last year. So again, there's your experience in the last year. And the word since usually takes the present perfect tense. Other expressions we use would be in my life, later, recently. These words would often take the present perfect tense. Now, using for and since, these refer to a time up to now and therefore take the present perfect tense. If you have a look at the next slide, you can compare for and since. The first example: I've lived here for 4 years. Then the second example: I've lived here since 1999. And the rule is that for is used for periods of time or duration, whereas since refers to an exact previous point in time. And an idea for teaching both is you could give sentences, have students hold up a piece of paper if they think the omitted word is for or the omitted word is since. For example, you would say, I have lived here, blank, 1984. I have lived here, blank, 10 years. And again, it's an idea to get the students to try to see if they can first work out themselves whether to use for or since, and again, it's using elicitation. Now, looking at some typical errors, a student may confuse the meaning and say, since the last 2 months, I haven't drunk coffee. Or, I have been living in Ireland since 5 years. So one of the most frequent functions of the present perfect is to refer to events that have just happened. So you could say, a bit of the ceiling has, your auxiliary verb have, just, your adverb, and fallen, your past participle of the verb to fall, on my head. Another example, Mary's had an accident. So again, that's one of the main functions, is to talk about life experience, but also to talk about something that has just happened. So that was the present perfect simple. Now looking at the past perfect simple, it has the same formation. The only change is your verb have must change to the past. For example, present perfect, I have been. Past perfect, I had been. So if we think that all perfect tenses must have the verb have and must have the past participle. Present perfect example, he's met you before. Past perfect, he has changes to had. He had met you before. And the function is usually to talk about an action, situation or event in the past which happened before another in a sequence. For example, I had heard all about him before event 2, before I met him. It also highlights an action at an indefinite point in time. For example, he had seen the book before. So you're not focusing on when he saw the book, but you're focusing on the action that he had seen it before. It also refers to situations which were true, but which have changed or may change. I had planned to work late tonight, but now I can't. And again, the third conditional also uses the past perfect. So the third conditional is looking back at something in your life that you would do differently if you could. For example, if I had won the lottery, I would have given you half. So you see the first part in the past perfect, if I had won, not present perfect, if I have won. Whereas the second part of the conditional, I would have given you half, is in the present perfect. So that concludes the perfect tenses and the simple past tenses. Now we will look at the perfect tenses.